Hi folks, Slick Slices here. Just a little quickie on Arthur Wright knives. Many of you will have seen that Paddy's Potato Peelers did a little video on Arthur Wright knives, and so I thought I'd show some of mine. And also, well, I introduced Ashley to Paddy because we were all aware of Arthur Wright as a Sheffield maker, but I think they had a bit of a reputation as making not the best quality of knives. Some of them were a bit shoddy, and certainly I had a few that were, let's say, suboptimal. You know, there's certain things that, like the printing of the Tang stamp on this one was done so badly that it's almost illegible, and that just seemed to me, you know, where's your pride in your work if that's, you know, you can't even print your name clearly on a knife. And then there were others like this pruner that I had that has, you know, gaps you could drive a coach and horses through, and asymmetry in the hafting there, which is just you know, very, very poor. And there were a lot of quality issues like that, plus of course Arthur Wright knives have never come out of the factory sharp, which is, it just irritates me. I mean, I know it's easy enough to put right, you can sharpen a knife, but if there's one thing a knife should do, it should cut. So I had a bit of a problem with them, and I saw Ashley on Instagram, and I sent him a message, you know, saying, honestly, if you want to make a success of these things, you really need to sort your quality out. And basically, he came back to me, and if he was offended, he didn't take offence, so that was quite good. But basically, he said to me that, well, we know Arthur Wright's been around since 1947, and they've gone through a couple of ownerships, but the previous owner had really let the standards down, I think. Under that previous owner, Michael Harrison was their workshop manager. So when Michael and his son Ashley took over, which was only about 3 years ago, they made a determined effort to pull up the quality. And when I called them out on this, Ashley effectively said, yes, but those knives you've got to kind of pre-our tenure. So, you know, you watch and wait and see how things go. And so that was a Sunday afternoon we had that conversation. So come the following day, the Monday, I phoned the famous Sheffield shop and I bought, I think it was 3 knives off them. Certainly one of them was this buffalo handled left hand knife, because my left hand's the only one that works properly, but I still open knives the same way as a right-handed person would. I'd say hold the handle in your right hand and open the blade with your left hand. So I don't really need left hand knives for this. It's not like a frame lock, but I bought this one and I bought 2 others, and I was struck by really how good they are considering the price, because these sort of buffalo horn and some of the other sort of nicer woods like the spalted beech that's here, they're only about 40 quid, and for that you're getting a nice bit of wood, a sort of polished blade, not quite Taylor's Eyewitness standards, but then they're not Taylor's Eyewitness prices. So it wouldn't take much to have brought these up to Taylor's Eyewitness standards, but you know, another half an hour on the grinders, it's going to add something significant to the price. So anyway, I've got a few. What I've tried to do, because the problem I had was when I phoned the famous Sheffield shop, Jane knew who I was, and because she knew who I was, that made it a little bit tricky to, as much as I said to her, just send me knives straight out of the drawer, don't check them. And I'm sure she didn't, but you just don't know whether she did or didn't. You can't say for certain. So I bought a few knives from other sources where possible, particularly Heine Haynes, who I know for certain don't check the knives because they still have the plastic on them that they come out of the Arthur Wright factory in. So things like this pruner, I bought both the pruners from from Heine, but the one that was a bit, well, shonky, let's be honest. And then this one, which is an ebony one, which they were doing recently, around about the 40 quid mark. As I say, when you have more premium materials, they tend to be about the £40 mark. This one is much, much better executed. Very little gapping of any serious nature. Still, funny enough, still a wee bit gappy at the tail end. I wonder if it's something to do with the fact that the design of the square end, the butt cap that's on these knives. My wife said to me that she actually preferred the other one because it had more rounded corners. These ones are a bit flat. And funnily enough, Lee White said to me the other day that you leave the sides flat because perhaps because you lack a bit of confidence. You know, when you've gone to all the bother of making a knife and getting it all knocked up and so on, and then when you do that final grind, to grind in and grind off those corners takes a little bit of nerve, because you could just spoil the whole thing and throw the whole thing out just by over grinding it, so people tend to undergrind them. But anyway, as I say, I've got quite a few of them. They do a lot of lamb's foot knives, and they do some special woods. So we've got a stripped maple that was done for moonraker knives, and equally also done for moonraker was the spalted beech. And I say, when you see the more premium woods, this is a 40 quid knife rather than a 30 quid knife. You tend to get much better polish on the blades. The strip maple was a 30 quid knife, so you don't have so much of the polish on the blades. This one here, which is even more expensive, silly expensive really, snakewood. I'm not a big fan of snakewood. I have a few snakewood knives, but that a little bit more expensive still, but again comes with a nice polished blade. They also do some interesting file work. This is very traditional Sheffield file work, and it does include 4 Maltese crosses in there. Maltese crosses, in many of the trademarks, Joseph Wrights are still around today, have the Maltese cross and star as their trademark. The other tang stamp, and Paddy mentioned this, was what's known as the candelabra stamp. Now, if I half close this, you can see it better. This was a one-off knife that Ashley made for me, and it has a candelabra stamp, which is basically a letter W with the letters A and the and sign and S laid on top of it, one on each branch of the candelabra. And this is it's actually quite an old Arthur Wright tang stamp, but Ashley uses this now for his work that he does himself as opposed to factory runs. So it tends to be either individual knives or small runs of knives. I know I've had small runs of knives. I had that Senator that I showed you a minute ago that's got the sort of dodgy stamp on it and some dodgy file work and so forth. I've had a couple of others, which these two came from Heine Haynes. So again, they were unchecked and they're pretty good. The only problem with this one is there's a wee crack in the horn at that bottom pin there, but it's not file work, it's actually chased or done with a chisel on the back is really excellent, as is this one, which is ebony. I quite like the ebony on this side actually. It's almost like desert ironwood. Doesn't have the density of desert ironwood, but it's nice. And then this one was one that was done in a batch of, I think it was either 4 or 6 knives that Ashley made, and I had one of them off him. These don't have the candelabra stamp, but it was a one-off. And this is a really beautiful knife, and this one was actually the one that was in my pocket today. I had to take it out of my pocket to do the video. He does these, the Barlow, and their Barlow has a relatively short bolster. I mean, it's long by their standards compared to any of these other knives, but compared to many knives, you could say that's short for a Barlow. It does the teardrop shape, and what's normal in Sheffield is the clip point with this nice swedge on it. Really nice. Now I've had a few of these. I gave one to Warthog in America, and I gave one to Paddy originally, which I then bought back off him. Yeah, so I introduced, after that conversation with Ashley, I introduced him to Paddy, because Paddy was very keen to have one of their newer knives in decent quality made, and I had a knife made for him by Ashley, which Paddy paid for, but I organised it, got it ordered, and then Paddy just paid for it when it was ready. So yeah, that was where his relationship with Ashley really started, because he kind of took up from there. And Paddy's very chatty, so of course he got in touch and spoke to him over the phone. I've got a couple of other slightly unusual patterns. Is the peach pruner, which is a a scaled down pruner, if you like, rather than a full pruner. Americans would call a hawkbill, but because we're a country of gardeners, we call it a pruner, so it's a gardening knife. And the pruner is obviously just that bit bigger. Peach pruner is smaller. They also do, though, a lamb's foot in the same sort of scale as the peach pruner, which just has a lamb's foot blade, but the same size as the peach pruner. This one's got particularly nice horn. I'm not a huge fan of horn, because sometimes it can just be a bit dull, and it does go flat, as Paddy was saying, over time. But if you've got some nice patterning in it like these two have, then it's great. The other one with this little blade is of course the Ettrick, but the Ettrick has a big handle. This makes it actually quite a good UK carry knife, because it's the blade being small and unthreatening. It's very uncontroversially well below the 3-inch mark. There's not even close. But if you've got big hands, there's still something to get hold of, which is very nice. So that's really all I want to say about Arthur Wright. I think they're though they're perhaps an old company of 75 years old or something like that. I think that they're an up-and-coming company at the same time, because Ashley's just young. He's obviously old enough to have served his time and knows how to make a decent knife, but he's still young enough that he's got a fairly lengthy career in front of him to carry on making knives, and I will carry on collecting their knives. As I say, I prefer, rather than buy specials that he does on Instagram. I've got another one actually. I've got a bushcraft knife that he did. I should really have hauled that one out as well. Rather than buying those, I tend to try and buy them under the radar, so that I can keep an eye on how they're doing. As at one point I ordered 4 of these, which is basically their lamb's foot but in ebony wood, and I gave them to 4 different reviewers in America and the UK, so that they could see how they were doing. But the reason I ordered a group of them is that I could compare them for consistency. But of course, knowing that I was ordering a group of them, Jane at the famous Sheffield shop knew that I was going to be reviewing them, so you would think that she would do at least a cursory check on them to make sure that they were of standard. And they're pretty good. There is a slight issue, and it was common to them all actually, funnily enough, and that's that there's a slight degree of asymmetry in them, in the grind. So as though they were kind of ground like, I'm exaggerating here, but as though they were ground at an angle like that, rather than being straight. It's not a big problem, and actually, I mean, in some ways I quite like it, because the fact you can tell that these were ground by hand, as opposed to there's a lot of water jet cutting goes on, even in the traditional knife world these days. GEC water cut all their blanks, and then with a water jet, and then they have CNC grinding machines to do their blades. So yes, they're going to come out perfect, but they're not really traditional knives. These are traditional knives made by a traditional knife maker in a very, very traditional way. The fact that they've got electric power for their grinding wheels and things is really the only difference between them and a 19th century Sheffield knife maker who would have perhaps been using water wheels or steam powered power to drive their machines. But the actual techniques of holding the knife against the stone or against the belt in order to grind it to the right shape, very, very traditional. The assembly of the knives with the hammer and pins on a stiddy is very, very traditional, and nothing has really changed in that. And part of the purpose of having traditional knives is that you have that continuity of tradition. Anyway, that's all I really want to say about Arthur Wright knives. I think they're really nice. They're worth collecting. The standards have improved dramatically. And as Paddy says, if you go on Instagram, there's always specials that come up as well. I tend to prefer the ordinary over the extremely unusual, but I do. This one was an Instagram knife, and it's one I end up carrying a lot because it just is really, really a very, very nice knife. This one I got from somebody on Facebook because it's a very nice knife in snakewood, you know, this was a one-off, and you can tell the difference between the one-offs. They're just that little bit better put together. I don't know if the straight pull is a better thing, but you can tell the difference. The one real difference that you can tell is that this one and this one and this one were sharp, and almost none of the others came sharp, and you do have to sharpen them. And if there's one criticism I would make to Ashley is, please, please, please sharpen your knives, because if there's one thing a knife should do is cut. And if you're trying to sell to a market of ordinary people, not knife geeks, then they need to be able to cut things with their knives. Otherwise, they're going to just look at them and think that they're junk, and they're not junk. They just need to sharpen. So if Taylor's Eyewitness can do it, even with their 12-pound endurance knives, they can make them sharp. If they can do it, you can do it. So that's the one thing. But I have to say, for 30 or 40 quid, which is where the majority of these knives, I mean, okay, the Senator's a bit more expensive and the Snakewood's a bit more expensive, but for their run-of-the-mill knives, you cannot get better than a nice Sheffield-made, you know, Sheffield-made lamb's foot in ebony for 40 quid. And it's just a really nice, good quality knife. Eventually you get them loose enough that you can open them without breaking your nails, but I shot this video already today and I managed to completely mash that nail, and I had to trim it right back to the quick because it was just mashed to pieces. But they do loosen up if you use them, and I can tell which ones I use and which ones I don't just by trying to open the blade. Anyway, if you like this stuff, give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more of it, please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. Thank you very much. Bye.